Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Jeff Stewart, Field CTO and Vice President of Global Solutions Engineering at SolarWinds. The topic of today's episode is PreSales Performance, metrics that matter. We're continuing our trend to talk about pre-sales and solutions teams' impact on the business. And so today's conversation, Jeff is going to highlight some of the metrics that matter to him in his organization and talk about maybe some of the misconceptions around metrics and how you measure solutions teams' impact on the business. In today's conversation, Jeff and I might go a little bit crazy and talk about why and how the data that we are looking at may or may not be the right measurement of the pre-sales profession. Enjoy today's episode.
Hi there, my name is Yuji Higashi, co-founder of PreSales Collective, and I have big news to share with you if you're a pre-sales leader or an individual contributor early in your career. We recently launched 2 training and enablement programs aimed at helping you take your career to the next level. Both programs were created by pre-sales leaders with input from dozens of SC veterans across our community. Now, we'll be running cohorts each month, so if you're interested in participating, visit us at presalescollective.com/enablement to submit an inquiry, and we'll send you details about each program, including this curriculum and schedule. We look forward to working with you on growing your career and being part of your career journey. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Jeff, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How are you this morning?
Hey, James, doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm glad to have you on the podcast. We've gotten to know each other pretty well over the last couple of years with PreSales Collective. You are a member of our PreSales Leadership Collective Advisory Board, and we've been talking about this topic for the last couple of months. So it's great to have the episode live for the PreSales profession here.
We have, and I'm excited to discuss this topic with you. And also, just a huge fan of what you guys are doing over at PreSales Collective and the community involvement and how we evangelize pre-sales and move this profession forward. So kudos to you guys.
Thanks, Jeff. And it's not possible without people like you leaning in and getting active and engaged. So really, thank you for that. One of the things that I want to highlight before we get into today's episode is your title as Field CTO. And this has actually come up in the PreSales Collective Slack a few times where people said, hey, what is this Field CTO role? Is it a path for solutions professionals? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the Field CTO role since you've been in that role for roughly a year now?
Absolutely. It's certainly a viable path for solutions engineering as a profession. That's also one of the things that I really love about the pre-sales community is there are so many paths as you enter into SE that can take you a number of different places from product marketing, field CTO, and other areas of the business. So it's a very exciting place to be. For me, the field CTO role, I kind of see it today as 2 capacities. One, there is kind of this individual contributor capacity, which is very externally focused. And then 2, there's also a kind of a field CTO role, which is also a leadership role. And for me, that's kind of where I'm at. And it's really internally focused in the sense of it's more about the partnership with the different business units in our organization and how we bring field data to them to help drive the business forward. So I spend a lot of time with product management, product strategy, our offering teams. And it's kind of cool. I get a seat at the table to say, these are the things that we're going to do with the product. And we all have to kind of sign off on that. So it really brings solution engineering and pre-sales and the voice of the customer to the table so we can make decisions that are best for the customers.
Thanks for sharing. And I know a couple of field CTOs out in the community that are evangelizing this role as well. So, I'd be curious to see how this role evolves and, if this is a common path for pre-sales professionals in the future. We'll definitely be keeping a keen eye on that. Jeff, before we get into today's topic, I want to ask you one more thing. When I hear the company SolarWinds, I know you guys have a great reputation, but one thing that I know that has happened over the last year is that there was a pretty big incident at SolarWinds, and you as the leader of the solutions organization, it's changed a bit of your function and your role within the company. So could we just hit it off and let's just talk about it a little bit? How has that experience changed your role and your solutions team's role within the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So late 2020, I think is what you're referencing, probably one of the most publicly viewed security incidents that we've had in probably the last 5 or 10 years. We're a little bit into COVID, everybody's working from home, and I get a call from our CRO on a Friday night about 10 p.m. And he tells me what's happened and says, we need everybody in the office on Saturday. So I hang up the phone and I start thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is really bad. Like starting to think about what happened. But went into the office and, as a leadership team, put together a plan and was really dreading what that Monday was going to look like, but really focused the team on a shift from pre-sales in the sense of we're working with prospects and customers to sell a solution to focusing on customers and transparency and empathy about what happened and how we were there to support them and get them through this particular incident to ensure that they were whole as a customer, because we're responsible in the sense of they're using our software. There was a security flaw within the software. And so it's interesting talking to professionals where they feel like they're at risk for their profession. And so the level of empathy that the team had, the way the team was able to shift from that selling motion to a customer focused motion and making folks whole and supporting upgrades and having really just these conversations about security and different security postures. And generally we're talking to practitioners in the IT space, but now we're talking to CISOs and C-level executives in conversations that were maybe very uncomfortable for a lot of my team, but it was really interesting to see the team focus and rally around supporting our customers. Honestly, the customers were the biggest surprise because they were super empathetic as well. The more detail they found out about what happened, the more they really understood that this was something that was likely to happen to any company based on the specific threat actors that were able to get inside of SolarWinds and get into our code.
I really appreciate the transparency and you sharing your perspective there. I'm not sure exactly how to ask this, Jeff, but a situation like this is never good. But do you think it has actually been somewhat of a positive for your team and your organization in your approach to selling?
100% for the team, for the organization, but I think more importantly, for the software community as a whole. So, one of the things that Sudhakar Ramakrishna, our CEO, really set forward was this concept of secure by design and transparency about what happened, but how we were going to move forward. And we've shared that detail with competitors in our space. We've shared it with other ISVs. We've obviously shared it with the federal government. We spent quite a bit of time working with different agencies on what the plan should look like, as well as some pretty well-known security advisors. So our transparency around how you protect yourself from a supply chain attack like this and build secure software and kind of deliver that bill of materials, I think as a community only makes us stronger, which is super important. So that level of transparency around that, I think, is the biggest takeaway that my team has taken and really kind of shared that with their customers and prospects as we move forward.
Thanks, Jeff. It sounds like one of those moments that just changes you as a leader forever. Changes your perspective.
Absolutely. Something I hope to never live through again. And anytime I see a security incident in the space, even if it is a competitor, my heart goes out to them because it is definitely not fun and not where I wanted to spend my holidays and the better part of the next year.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Jeff. Let's get into today's topic, PreSales Performance, metrics that matter. At the PreSales Collective, we've continued to talk about pre-sales as a business, our role in sales, our role in generating revenue, and really the metrics behind it. We've been hearing from the community that this is a topic that people want more of. And I know this is something that you're really passionate about, Jeff. And so let's maybe just start from the top. What aspects of your business are you looking to track?
There are a couple of key aspects that we really look at from a pre-sales perspective. I think one of the main ones that comes to focus is kind of team or individual performance, especially at SolarWinds. In most cases, depending on segmentation or selling motion, we run in a pooled model. So it's important for us to understand where the team is spending time, where individuals are spending time, and how that translates to performance of both an individual and the team itself. Other aspects that we like to look at are sales performance and how the metrics we track play a part in that sales performance, as well as forecasting. Areas of potential optimization, which I think is especially important today, given everything we see with the tech community right now and layoffs. And so where can we be more efficient with our time? Where can we focus on higher revenue generating activities are always something that we're looking to focus on. And then metrics that we can take back to the business. So what data can we track that we can take back to product that they can use to make decisions about where we go strategically from a product or a portfolio stance, as well as who are the competitors, how often are they coming up, et cetera. And then I think the last thing that we really tend to focus on is, and this one came to be more in light with COVID and the security incident, but business performance. Interestingly enough, we were able to look at some of the activities and historical activities that my team was doing to understand how we could forecast the business as we went into out quarters. So have demos dropped off or have they increased with some of these challenges that we've faced in the last couple of years? And how do we tie that metric to other metrics in the business to think about where we're headed?
Let me actually ask a very baseline question to you. Why do these metrics actually matter to your business?
I'm going to reference a quote. If we have data, let's look at the data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. I think that translates to the SE community as a whole because, we're spending so much time with customers and being empathetic with customers that we're very opinionated on where we believe the business should go and what products should be doing, what features we should be developing. But if you don't have the data to back that up, then it's going to be somebody else's opinion and oftentimes not the opinion of the community itself. So this data and these metrics that you collect are important to make informed decisions for the business. And as you go to bat to get things that you need for your team or for the business, without that data, you just don't have as much credibility.
I love that quote, actually. I've never heard that quote. It's pretty good.
It's not mine. I've stolen it. So I'll have to figure out who it came from.
It makes sense and it matters. And I like the conversation leaning toward credibility because I mean this respectfully. You and I have talked about this plenty of times, is that I've been woefully surprised with the lack of data and metrics that many pre-sales and solution leaders are not using in their business. Maybe as someone who's been pretty data-driven from the beginning of my career, I always felt like I needed too much data. I needed to be able to sort through it, to be able to make informed decisions on the impact of my team, the capacity of my team, the performance that we're actually having. And, this is, I think, a little bit of a debate within the profession of what is the gold standard when it comes to pre-sales and solution metrics. I could tell you that the PreSales Collective doesn't have that answer yet. We're trying to figure that out with leaders. But I think it is a really interesting conversation, and I'm glad we're talking about it today.
Absolutely. And I think some of that gold standard is going to depend. It's going to depend on where your business is at. It's going to depend on, as a company, how many SEs you have, how much revenue you're doing, what kind of segmentation you have, who are the customers you're serving. So some of it will change. And to your point, sometimes you can have too much data that you get lost in that data and you're just kind of moving things around and looking at different metrics and not kind of refining the process and focusing on what matters. So I think for each pre-sales team, they've got to make that decision as to what do they need to really, one, understand that their team is performing as well as they can be, and two, that they're focused on the right activities that help drive the business forward itself.
Jeff, maybe that's where I want to follow up is, what are some of those key activities that really matter to you? You gave us the buckets, you gave us the themes, at the beginning of the podcast, but let's get maybe a little tactical here.
So when I think about probably one of the most basic metrics that a pre-sales organization can track, outside of how they're engaged in opportunities and the activities they're doing in those opportunities, what I would say is the ultimate goal for a pre-sales professional is securing the technical win. And so at SolarWinds, we've been using what we call a TSO for almost as long as I've been here, which is about 12 years at this point. And the TSO is the technical sign-off. So as we engage with opportunities, prospects, and customers, we're really focused on understanding what they need to feel comfortable with the solution and that it meets their technical needs and requirements. That's really what we work towards in almost every opportunity, is that technical sign-off. And it's interesting to see that when, as an organization, we achieve that technical sign-off on an opportunity, we actually have a much higher close rate for those opportunities. So anytime we achieve that TSO, we're actually seeing an 85 to 90% chance that that opportunity is going to close versus kind of, the other metrics that we look at, which would be like no SE involved on an opportunity, which happens, has more of a 20 to 25% chance to close. And then just having an SE engaged in the opportunity. So they've gone in, they've done an activity. It could be a demo. It could be, a conversation around technical questions, whatever that activity might be. Even those engagements tend to have a much higher propensity to close with a range of 60 to 65%. And so I think those are, at the basic level, extremely powerful metrics that you can take to the business that say, hey, get the team involved if you want a higher chance of closing your opportunities.
I love those data points. And you have them right at your fingertips. So if somebody asks you impact on the business, you know what they are. And that's something that we teach at PreSales Collective Leader Elevate. And you'd be surprised with the amount of people who don't necessarily have that information readily available. I'm curious, right? Because you had mentioned that you've been using the TSO, the technical sign-off, for as long as really you've been at SolarWinds. Can you maybe describe a little bit more about what that actually means? Because I do feel like there's a little bit of a philosophical debate within the profession on like what a technical win actually is. With such high close rates on TSO, I'd love to hear your perspective on what that actually means.
For us, it's a direct engagement between the SE and the customer itself. And that's an important aspect of it, because a lot of times I think you'll have AEs or sales professionals say that they've got the technical win and take that back to the business. But you might have some discrepancies between what the SE believes the technical win looks like versus the AE. So it's important that there is alignment between sales and SE as far as what that is. For us, it's really ensuring that we've answered all the technical objections and questions that the prospect or customer might have. We've potentially done installation and configuration of the software itself. We've done some customization of that software and really gotten to a place where the prospect or the customer is like, yes, this meets my needs. This solves the problems that I have or had, and we feel comfortable moving forward with this particular solution. It's interesting because I did see something on LinkedIn last week, I believe, about this, and it was maybe something you commented on as well, but it was about the technical sign-off or the technical win and how that is not enough. And so there was one follow-up question that this pre-sales leader wanted their team to ask, which was about vendor selection. So great, we got the technical win, but are we the selected vendor? So that's something that I'm kind of thinking about in my brain as how can we add that kind of into the process and see if that changes the impact of those numbers and the win rates.
I'll be really curious to see how that impacts your business or what you end up coming up with, because that's actually been at my crux trying to figure that out. Can you have technical win across multiple vendors? And then is it just a single vendor of choice? And what if I commit technical win, but my sales team, is priced way too high? Contract value is for 2 years. Someone else is offering 1 year. Those are the things that have always come up in my head as to maybe where technical win can fall short. So I am happy to hear that you're thinking about that. And there is a discussion around this, because I have talked to some companies who have technical win being a very, very loose definition. And I don't think it actually carries weight and validity. And so it's not really a metric that holds enough value within an organization. So I'm curious to see your evolution as TSO changes within your org. This leads me to a question around headcount. You had mentioned headcount earlier. With the pre-sales profession right now and the state of the economy, you're starting to see some layoffs, hearing people talk about recessions. And so headcount justification is a conversation that many people are having. So I'm curious, how do you use these metrics, especially TSO, as it relates to making informed decisions, regarding headcount?
I see a lot of folks in the industry making those decisions based off some pretty simple analysis in the sense of what is the rep to SE ratio? What is the SE to revenue attribution or contribution? I think those are really good things to look at as part of the equation, but I don't think those are the only metrics or analysis that you should be doing. So for us, we look at the different activities that the SEs are participating in that are both tied directly to sales, but also the activities that we do outside of sales. So what are we doing with marketing? What are we doing with CSM? What are we doing with our renewals business? What are those activities? And where are the SEs spending their time? Are those activities contributing to the revenue to drive the business forward? So we look at where they spend their time, how much time they're spending, and we kind of factor that into the equation as well. Then we look at things like product complexity. So SolarWinds has a portfolio that spans 60 different products as well as different technology verticals. And so having an SE that can master all of those is hard to come by. We do have some and they're fantastic, but some of these products are extremely technical and require specialization. So for example, we have a specialized database team, both on the sales and pre-sales side. And so we have to think about specialization and product complexity as it factors into those equations itself. And then I think you look at selling motion and segmentation. So we operate SMB all the way up to enterprise, with our sweet spot kind of being the mid-market space. And so that's going to be kind of velocity selling at the SMB space, all the way up to field sellers and traveling at the enterprise space. And so you've got to factor that in. And then you have things like language requirements and country requirements and all of that. And so these are all part of the equation in deciding what kind of that appropriate ratio of SEs to support the business is.
I really appreciate that answer, Jeff, because I do feel like sometimes it does seem a little too simple. It's like, oh, here's the AE SE ratio for the certain segment. It makes sense in some organizations, but doesn't necessarily make sense in, I would say, most organizations. If you have a single product, sure. Okay, maybe you've got a pretty simple sales process. You can make that work. But I just think that the way products and the platforms have changed over the last couple of years, especially hearing that you have over 50 to 60 products, that complexity is massive. And to be able to have an organization that's matrix to support that, that's a lot of work. And that's where the data really can be your best friend in terms of making informed decisions. And so, as we kind of talked about earlier, organizations that don't have the data to support that model, I do wonder how they've been successful. And, I'm curious if anyone is listening and has a point of view on that, please reach out to me. I'm intrigued to learn more. This is something that's been coming up on the last couple of podcasts, Jeff, is this idea of a maturity model around solutions. And I've actually talked to a number of leaders about this and talking about like the metrics that matter in the stage of the company. You mentioned it yourself. I know from my experience being the first SE at a couple companies, my whole goal and my whole job was proof of concepts. It was get the win on the proof of concept, show that the POC works, and then it moves in the sales cycle, right? It moves down the sales cycle. As we grew, our role changed, right? More demos, more technical validation, whiteboarding aspects of things, and then it even went into discovery. And so when I think about how I justified headcount as the first SE, it was like POC conversion. It was the hours of work I was doing on POC conversions. And that made sense for a simple product and a team that was, 60, 70 people. But obviously that changes when you add zeros to that. And so I'm just curious if you have perspective on this maturity model as it relates to solutions, specifically around the metrics that actually matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe there is kind of a maturity model that we could wrap around this for solutions organizations. And some of those metrics, as you indicated, will change over time. So, as your first SE or a startup, like you're just doing everything you can to drive the business forward. And you're not really thinking about metric collection or notes about opportunities or what you did to get the win. And so I think as organizations grow in revenue and size, that's where it becomes especially important for those organizations to mature and start thinking about what is this repeatable motion for the organization? What are the metrics that we can tie to that repeatable motion that help us move opportunities forward and grow? And then tying those back to the analysis and bring them forward to the business and saying, hey, look, we can do this ratio thing, but we're not getting the most from the team. We're not maximizing where we can be effective. And so that's where looking at what part of the sales cycle we operate in, what are the key things that we do, and which of those things contribute the most to revenue to push the business forward.
So Jeff, one thing in my career that has maybe been a catalyst for PreSales Collective and a driver for me is trying to figure out a singular metric that helps define pre-sales. And maybe it doesn't exist out there, and that's okay. But I used to always be in my business and say, what are the metrics that I need to collect that matter and that roll up into a singular solution score? Something that allowed me to manage my business almost like a pipeline or a forecast or some of the technologies that do deal prediction. That was something that I was pushing my company to do at the time with our product generally. It's something that I've always kind of wished would exist out there. I'm not necessarily asking you if you have that, but is there some sort of metric that you wish that you had to help you manage the business?
I don't know that there's a single metric for me and my organization. I think it's a combination of activities that lead to a desired outcome. And so to your point, like, can we put in a scoring system around these different metrics or activities that we're doing as we engage with an opportunity that end in that desired outcome, or for us, that technical sign off, and use that to better forecast the business. It's interesting because I do think that we're starting to see a lot of focus on our space and pre-sales from different vendors. And they're thinking about this the same way maybe Salesforce and other vendors thought about opportunities and AI and how we can look at the activities and predict the business and what the outcome is going to be. And so for us, it is looking at the different activities that contributed to the win and contributed to that TSO, and how do we do more of that? So how do we go into this opportunity? What did the SE do that contributed to the win? And how do I go repeat that across the other parts of the business?
Thanks for that perspective, Jeff. A lot of the genesis of this also comes from Mark Roberge, who is at Stage 2 Capital. And one of the things that Mark did in his career at HubSpot is found a weighted formula for hiring sales reps. And he ran his interview processes looking for a number of metrics and weighted those metrics. And then actually, once those people were hired, measured their performance against those metrics over time and found a score that actually predicted success at his company. And he used it and has done a lot of writing on it. And it's actually something I was rereading recently because it was just kind of getting my head spinning a little bit about the solution score, right? Or the solutions metric. And so I'm not sure, again, if other people are doing something similar, but that idea of taking the activities across the business, weighing them, rolling them up across segments or products or selling motions to give you productivity. Because I think, like you just mentioned, as a leader, what you would love to have is some sort of report that says, hey, Jeff, like this is the sales cycle that we're in. We're lacking activities here. So our prediction score tells you to do this many activities over the next number of months, and it will turn into a 25% chance of sales conversion. So I'm nerding out on the data here and like my wish that would happen in the profession, but that's really where this question comes from. And I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm actually going to have to look that up and read up on that. That sounds really interesting. Also, James, kind of the flip side of that is, and maybe we'll touch on this a little bit more later, but there are also some aspects that, in my opinion, just can't be tracked with metrics in the pre-sales community. And so when I think about all of this data that we collect and metrics that we track, I've got a team of fantastic pre-sales professionals, and they're just doing a number of things that I'm like, how do I bottle that up and get more of it? And it's not something I can really track. It's just something that I see happening. And I see it a lot in the pre-sales community. I think it's just how SEs are wired, but how they engage with customers and how they solutions around problems, and really just kind of this grit that they have and desire to really support customers, move things forward. I just don't know how you measure that with a metric. It's just something that you see in the field and they're like, yes, how do I get more of that?
And I love that, right? And that's actually something that we at PreSales Collective have talked about a few times around pre-sales at the center of influence. A lot of times the role is just compensated on sales revenue, and it falls in sales and sales activity, but there's so many other departments that we influence and impact. We've even done podcasts on organizations that have solutions teams that support their marketing work and their analyst relations. You mentioned there's so much that happens with product and engineering and product innovation. This happens across all these organizations. And I think this is like the conversation I want to have as a profession is like, are we looking at things the wrong way? You said like understanding grit. Grit is something that I think we all know is a really important aspect of this role, especially as you're, supporting multiple product lines, multiple sales executives. Sometimes if you're in the pull model, you're supporting a wide variety. Like you got to be able to work through that. You got to be able to be flexible. You got to be nimble. You got to be on your feet. You got to be curious. And there's so many things that happen here. And I think this is where I struggle is that so many times we're just tied to these activities and revenue. And people say revenue solves all problems. I like to be on the flip side of it. Revenue hides all problems. We've all been in organizations where if you look at attainment, right, a solutions engineer or a solutions consultant on your team might be doing everything right from the metrics perspective. When you think about them from a power ranking perspective or where they are in the business, they're a middle or bottom performer. That happens a lot of times. I've experienced it myself. I've talked to leaders about it. So that's where I kind of struggle. So I want to have this conversation around metrics and like where we are, but like, what are we missing? And maybe the answer is that we can never actually track it and we can never ever get there. And this profession will continue to be this abstract role that is extremely valuable to organizations, but extremely hard to measure. But maybe somebody will figure out how to measure it effectively I'm really not sure, but I want to pose that question out there.
I think that, sometimes that's what makes good pre-sales leaders is they see the things that can't be measured within their team and they advocate for that and they continue to talk about them and their brand and what they're doing to be successful. But again, in some cases, it's not something we can tie to a metric, but it is something that as a good leader you see and you just try to promote it. It's also interesting, like you mentioned attainment. There have been situations where we will have some territories or some reps that just are not getting to the attainment we need. And I don't think that's always a reflection of the reps or pre-sales. It could be a patch or whatever, but I'll take my best SE and I'll be like, you're going to this shitty patch. And they're like, why? Why are you doing this to me? And I'm like, because you have what I need in this particular area. And I know you'll turn this team around and help drive it forward. So I think you've got to think about outside of the metrics, like, do they possess that grit and influence? And can you stick them anywhere and see them be successful?
I agree with you because I feel like a really great solutions consultant can up-level a region where maybe there's underperforming account executives. And like you said, it's sometimes like the SCs are like, why are you putting me with these people? Or why are you putting me in this region?
Why are you doing this to me?
Yeah, but as much as I want to simplify it, it's impossible to simplify it. You have account executives who have different skills. You have territories that have different TAMs and maturity. And it is a science, right? It's a science and an art. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. And where a lot of the crux of this conversation has come over the last couple of months is truthfully with layoffs. I've been asking people, how do you go to your CFO to say, well, you can't actually cut my team. This is all the things that we do. And a lot of times CFOs might say, well, we have a ratio, or where's the metrics, or what matters. And we all know in our profession, of course, we make an impact. Just to be super vulnerable here, part of the things that we teach at Leader Elevate are experiences that Tom, myself, and other leaders have gone through. And I've been in a scenario where new executive leadership came in my career and like, James, what does your team actually do around here? And I thought we did everything, but I wasn't measuring the impact effectively. And so when things tightened up, I was kind of left stranded. And I've learned a lot from that situation. And it's a role play scenario in every single Leader Elevate that we have. But that's just kind of the crux of like where I think we're at in the market right now. And why I want to continue to have this conversation is it's timely. Like in the last couple of years when things were great for everybody, it was easy to just be like, oh, we need headcount, we can hire headcount. But as things tighten up, I'm talking to leaders who say, well, my organization said we're getting rid of this many AEs and this is the ratio. So we have to get rid of this many SCs. And there was like no debating about it. Again, not to go back to this point, but like maybe this can't get figured out. Maybe it can get figured out. But like, how do we get executives, CFOs, especially CEOs, to understand that if they empower this role effectively, it just unlocks so many different things. And I think I'm on a little bit of a tangent here, Jeff, but at this point in the profession, this is also why we've been pushing for solutions, because when the solutions team takes a little bit more of the customer journey ownership, it's a little bit easier to justify the impact of this team and this org. And you talked about all the support that happens in post-sale and upsell and expansion and adoption and utilization that nobody is really tracking. They're like, oh, we need this, but it's an interesting time in SaaS and it's an interesting time for this profession. And I'm just glad that we're having this conversation. I know we're kind of going off script a bit, but I think it's an important conversation to have and, just put out there to the ecosystem to see who is solving it and how they're solving it.
It's for sure timely. I think for SolarWinds, we've been fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it. We've been kind of preparing for this, based on some of the incidents that have happened recently. So the security incident, which we talked about earlier, but also the pandemic, which everybody has gone through. And so it's really caused us to step back over the last couple of years and say, let's take a deeper look at these metrics and figure out where we are participating and what is that contributing to the business. We're kind of in a place where, if the CFO does come down to me and say, this is what's happening, I'm going to say, well, this is what you can expect to see based on doing that particular behavior. My hope is that as a leadership team, we've organized in a fashion that, we can show it through data. But I think we're also kind of in a fortunate situation that most of the business sees the extreme value that the pre-sales organization has on not just sales, but to your point, CSM, to our renewals business, to our product business, to our product marketing. And we've got our hands everywhere. And some of that's not easy to measure, but the business does see it and they celebrate that all the way up to our CEO, which talks about our organization being the tip of the spear. But, to your point, that alone won't be enough. And so I think you've got to have that and you've got to have the data, and that tells the full story.
Thanks for that, Jeff. I mean, you're really talking about team branding and organizational branding, and having, executive buy-in on the impact of your team is mission critical to the success. It's been great having you on the podcast today. I really appreciate the conversation. I definitely appreciate all the insights and everything that you do for the community, Jeff.
Thanks, James. Glad to be here. And I hope this spurs some additional conversation for our community.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing a couple people message us in Slack after this episode.
Awesome.
All right, PreSales Collective. I hope you enjoy talking about data as much as I do. It's great talking to Jeff today about the metrics that matter. This is a topic that Jeff and I have been discussing for months around PreSales Collective. So it's great to finally have a podcast to discuss this topic and bring it to the global pre-sales profession. And one of the things that I really liked was Jeff's buckets of metrics that matter: team and individual performance, sales performance, productivity and efficiency, how data is utilized to make product decisions, and really the business impact, being able to look at team activity and talk about out quarters. And the quote that Jeff made about utilizing data or opinions is spot on. I think many of us, maybe including ourselves, I know including me, have thought about that before. I've made decisions based off opinions, based off feel, because I didn't necessarily have the data. And I really like that Jeff has figured out technical win. Because as I brought up, technical win continues to be a debated topic within the profession, but it sounds as though at SolarWinds, they've really figured out TSO, technical sign-off. And Jeff has the metrics. He's got the numbers when TSO happens, when TSO has been met, the impact on deals, and having an 85 to 95% close rate, and then knowing the close rate of deals without solutions consultants. That is understanding metrics that matter to the business. And Jeff talked about his team's brand. The CEO says that they're the tip of the spear. They have a great brand within their organization. But unfortunately, that isn't the case in every organization. And so we're having a realistic conversation as we're talking about recession, as we're talking about layoffs, as we're talking about tightening of the market, which may or may not be impacting your business. How do solutions teams continue to thrive in this environment? How do you be able to say the solutions team's impact on the business is immeasurable? But what we are measuring are A, B, C, and D. And here is why, if we're making cuts around the business, the solutions team cannot be altered as much as this other team or this other organization. That is the question I'm going to continue to pose to the profession. And maybe it's something that I'm over engineering. Maybe it's something that needs to just be super simple. But what and how do we truly measure the impact of this profession? We at PreSales Collective have made it clear that we are trying to define gold standard. We are trying to define excellence, understand what best in class looks like. And as we continue to elevate this role, because we believe it's the future of sales and extremely important to customers in this new SaaS environment, what are our levers to pull with an organization? How do we understand our impact and value beyond just sales, into marketing, into customer success, into adoption, utilization? What are those metrics? And maybe solutions consultants should only own a certain aspect of the business. But talking about data, there are companies out there that are unifying the customer journey through a solutions organization and are having a measurable impact on the business. And so I still believe we're in the early days of how we understand this role and this role's impact to organizations, especially as sales continues to change. And so I would like to invite anyone to have a conversation with me about this topic. If you think that you're doing things right, let me know. Let me know what those are. I'm happy to have a confidential conversation and keep that anonymous. But for us, we want to continue to understand what best looks like. What are the best organizations in the world doing as it relates to metrics and measurement of solutions organizations? All right, PreSales Collective, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget, you can check out the Member Hub for our latest and greatest. And I look forward to hearing from you in Slack around metrics that matter.